Hey everybody, how you doing? This is me, True Teacher again, and this video is going to be a response to a good buddy of mine who just happens to be a very controversial fellow YouTube vlogger by the name of Kem123. So Kem, I'm making this video in response to your video. I think you put it out today. Titled Are All New Ricans Better? Something to that effect. Um, so, in that video, you're responding to Miss Moon, and basically, I guess the gist of everything was her objecting to the tone of a lot of your videos when it concerns Puerto Ricans and the things you say about them. And on her point, wanting to point out to you that, yes, although it's undeniable that there is a very dysfunctional element within the Puerto Rican community in New York City, in particular, the urban areas of the Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, that that element by no means is a reflection of the entire community, and that she finds it, I guess, unfair that you're always portraying that segment of the society in a way that, suggests that this is the way all Puerto Ricans are. I can relate to the way she feels because, to be honest with you, initially when I came across your channel, that was the same way that I felt with regards to your videos dealing with African Americans or people of African descent in general. And even though I'm not African American, because I am an English speaker, first language, I get lumped in with African Americans. Now, I grew up in the Bronx on the Grand Concourse, um, 70s, 80s. I moved out in the 90s, but yeah, I did grow up there. And I know firsthand that a lot of the things that you're saying are true. There are very dysfunctional elements within the community. At that period of time, that neighborhood was predominantly split kind of 50-50 between African Americans and Puerto Ricans. So, yeah, I grew up with them, I went to school with them, and I got to see and experience the absolute worst that is there. Nobody is denying that at all, but what you have to understand is like people like myself and Miss Moon, the reason why we object to, I guess, the way you state your opinions is because until very recently, you didn't make that distinction that the people that you're talking about in your videos are not representative of the entire community, whether that be African American, Africans in general, or their descendants, or New Yorkers. Um, and we felt, and I guess, well, let me put it to you this way. Before I got to know you, I really did think that you were just another internet racist. I can't call you a white supremacist because you're not white and you don't identify as such, but I definitely thought that you were just another person that was on here bashing, people of African descent. And the reason for that is because around the time when you created your channel, I think it was about, it must have been like, I think it was 2015, the first incarnation of your channel. And around that time, that's when we had people like Tommy Sotomayor, and other people out there, these black men who were constantly bashing black women. And then in response, you had a lot of black women that were putting out videos talking about black men. Black men ain't shit, and we need to date interracially and all of this. And it was very, for me, seeing that was very hurtful, because the things that these people were saying were gross exaggerations. And unfortunately, we live in a society where the dominant population does generalize. They make gross generalizations. And this is a point that you brought out in the beginning of your video, that this society notoriously makes blanket generalizations about different populations, you know? And you said, well, that's what they do, but why is it a problem when you do it? Well, the reason why it's a problem for people like us is because of the fact that while you understand that the people that you're talking about are not representative of the entirety of those communities, there are a lot of people out there who really are genuinely racist people. And they do generalize us in this way, looking at the most dysfunctional elements in our community and then extrapolating that to represent everyone. And unfortunately, this isn't something that is, the effects of it are not isolated to YouTube. This is something that we have to deal with in our everyday lives. The fact that when we go out into the real world, more often than we would care to admit, we are being negatively judged and evaluated in ways that have very real negative consequences on our lives. And it's not fair. And we're constantly being in a position where we have to defend ourselves. We have to defend our communities. Because when people see us, right away, they have this image in their minds of who we are and what we're all about before we even get a chance to open our mouths and speak for ourselves. And a lot of times, even after, we get a chance to speak, despite, no matter how well mannered we are, no matter how intelligent we are, these people still have this paradigm in their minds that because we come from a certain location, because we belong to a certain ethnic group, that we are just like these stereotypes that they see in the media, being portrayed in the media all the time. So for me, when I came across your channel and I saw all those videos about Mr. BBC, and I was offended because you never made the distinction between the very real dysfunctional elements in the society and the fact that no, they don't represent everyone. This is just them. And, like I said, this is something that we have to deal with in our everyday lives. Whenever we go out, into society. Now, you can see me, everybody can see me, you hear me, the way I speak, the way I present myself. I'm the farthest thing you can get from a thug. But when I'm dealing with law enforcement, when I'm dealing with the legal establishment, a lot of times in potential employment situations, social situations, people automatically assume that I'm some kind of ghetto lowlife. And even though I'm not an African American, like I said, because I'm an English speaker, people assume that I am an African American and they treat me as if I'm the worst stereotype. A lot of times, even when people are aware of the fact that I'm not African American, just the fact that I'm a person of African descent alone, automatically they look at me at a certain way, they talk to me a certain way, like I'm automatically some black radical, irrational, overly emotional, Afrocentric lunatic, um, low IQ, when 9 times out of 10, I'm better educated and more intelligent than the people that are talking this shit to me. And so that's the problem, is that it's just frustrating for us because it just comes across as one more person who's taking a bash at us. It wasn't until I got to communicate with you person to person that I recognized who you really were and what you really were about. But before that, just being on your channel, yeah, I really thought you were a racist. And especially because your videos and your comment sections, you attract a lot of racist trolls. Um, there's no other way that I can put it. And I know, you got a lot of videos out there. It's really hard to monitor everyone. I get it. But, when you got people like Liquid Snake and, who's the other asshole? Um, Freddy, whatever the fuck his handle is. And there's some other people, Danzo, these dickheads. I mean, these are people who are just really, it's not for them a hatred towards or displeasure with the negative elements in a particular ethnic group, particularly African American society or whatever. They just hate people of African descent completely across the board. And I mean, when you listen to the shit that they say, you would really think that you're talking to like a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And, but, my way of dealing with people like this and, my way of responding to you initially, well, even now, was to counter the stereotypes with actual facts. And I think that is what led to us eventually communicating more and exchanging numbers and speaking person to person. And then I understood where you were coming from, that the things you were saying, the videos were you making, was not about people of African descent in general, but it was about a very specific demographic. And in this video that you just put out, you made that very clear when talking about, Nuyorican. You made a very good point of pointing out that you're not talking about all Puerto Ricans. You're not talking about all African Americans. You're talking about very specific elements in those communities. It would have been nice if you had made that distinction earlier on in some of the earlier videos that you put out. I think in a lot of ways it might have made your life a lot easier, considering the kind of backlash that you get from people. But then again, the kind of knuckleheads you're dealing with, I don't think a lot of times it would have made a difference, because the people that are coming against you for a large degree tend to be people who are of that mindset. So I don't know. But I think there are other people, like myself, who really did get a wrong impression of you because they never had the opportunity to communicate with you person to person. And yeah, so I mean, yeah, when it comes, and Miss Moon, she even said that to you, in the comment section, that up until now she thought that you hated Puerto Ricans and that you hated her in particular. So yeah, I get where you're coming from. I get the feeling of frustration that you have, that motivates you to make your videos and when you're talking about these certain people. But at the same time, you do have to take into consideration that even though you don't think that way, a lot of the people who do come to your channel, they do. And because a lot of your videos are only giving a partial aspect of what you really think, they come away thinking that you're on their team and that you're one of them. And as a matter of fact, that's really, I think, a great deal of what is at the heart of the tension between you and one of our favorite YouTube personalities, Mr. Batista. This is a very emotionally disturbed individual, and he's one of those people who is, he hates black people, people of African descent in general. He claims to be a Dominican nationalist, but when you really listen to him, he really hates Dominicans too. Like dark skinned Dominicans. He doesn't even like them. So, when he saw all your videos talking about, Mr. BBC going down to the DR to get an orgasm, he was of the opinion that you were of like mind. And it wasn't until he came out with one of his crazy ass videos talking about, all this race realism bullshit and, black people having low IQs and all of this crap, and you contradicted him by giving him facts. You mentioned that, he said something to the effect of, all black countries are fucked up and nobody would ever want to live there and they all have low IQs. And you pointed out to him that, well, there's countries like Trinidad and Jamaica and that are doing very well, that are majority black. And the Bahamas is also doing very well. It's a majority black country. They have a higher GDP than the Dominican Republic and a higher IQ level. And he fucking lost his shit behind that because he thought that, you all were buddy buddy on that, hey, I hate black people, you hate black people. And then you came and you flipped the script on him. And he's never forgiven you for that, And then you went and, you had to drop some truths on him, and he ain't know how to deal with that shit. But that's the problem, you know. I think now in your videos, you're becoming more rounded, and people are beginning to see, you know, or get a better idea of where you're coming from. But there's a long legacy of, you know, previous years and a lot of material out there that wasn't so clear. And unfortunately, it has attracted a lot of kind of people, you know? And for people like Miss Moon and myself and other people who make comments on your videos, it's hurtful to us because we have to deal with the consequences in our daily lives of people who just look for excuses to dismiss us. And so, in the hands of people like that, it's like it's more fuel to the fire, adding more fuel to the fire of, you know, the struggle that we have to go through. And, you know, like I said, it would just be nice if we didn't have to constantly be in a situation where the most negative elements of our communities are being pushed forward and representing us. You know, it's very frustrating to see the mainstream media doing it, and then to go online and see people doing it, and then to be judged in your everyday life by people who just make up their minds automatically about who you are and what you're all about, and just, you know, decide because you belong to a certain demographic that you're less capable, you're less intelligent, you know, and act surprised when they find out that you actually have a fucking brain in your head. So, yeah, and that's why we feel the way we do. So, I hope you understand where I'm coming from with this. I think you understand Miss Moon, where she's coming from, but yeah, I mean, that's the situation. I don't I don't grudge you for talking about those elements, you know, the fact that we do have these elements in our communities, because quite frankly, as you did point out in your video, we don't want to deal with that shit. You know, we don't want to deal with those kind of people. And that's not the kind of life we want to have for ourselves and our families. But what we also don't want is to be lumped together with them and to be held responsible for their dysfunction, as if we're down with all of that, like that's the way we live, those are, you know, the standards of our morals. No, we don't want to live around people like that. We don't want to have to deal with the negative repercussions of their behavior, but at the same time, we don't want to be stigmatized by the rest of society just because a certain group of people are dysfunctional. You know, it's not fair to us. And unfortunately, like I said several times, we're constantly being put in situations where we're being judged like that. And it would just be nice if there were more voices out there pointing out the fact that the majority of us are good, decent, law abiding people who are just trying to do the best that we can to improve our lives for ourselves and our families, you know? So I guess that's all I have to really say on this matter. And I really do appreciate, once again, I do appreciate the fact that you went into detail to really explain where you're coming from in that last video. So Look forward to speaking to you again in the future at some point when I got time, cause you and me get on the phone and we kill a whole damn day. And as much as I love talking to you, man, I got shit to do. But anyway, wishing you all the best and talk to you again soon. Peace out.